A stranger sat down across from me at a quiet cafe table, slid a folder toward me, and told me he had hundreds of millions of dollars and one simple request: marry him tomorrow morning at City Hall. I looked at the man across from me, then looked past his shoulder at my husband, kissing another woman 30 feet away, and something inside my chest, something that had been quietly breaking for months without my permission, finally snapped clean in half. I made the decision in exactly 3 seconds. I said yes, my name is Alexis Monroe. I am 32 years old, and until that afternoon, I believed the life I had built with my husband, Ryan, was simply going through a rough patch, the way marriages sometimes do after 10 years. I sat hidden behind a row of potted plants on a cafe patio in Tribeca, my untouched coffee going cold in front of me, watching him lean across a table toward a woman in a crimson silk dress. My stomach did not just drop. It felt like the floor of my entire life had quietly given way beneath me while I kept smiling, kept cooking his dinner, kept believing his excuses. I recognized her instantly. Vanessa Cole, wife of Nathaniel Cole, one of the wealthiest shipping magnates in New York. Ryan's hand, still wearing the wedding band I had chosen for him with so much hope in a small jewelry shop 9 years ago, rested gently on top of hers like it belonged there. I thought about the night we got engaged, how he had cried, actually cried, telling me I was the only person who had ever believed in him before anyone else did. I thought about the 10 years of savings I had handed over, dollar by dollar, so he could start his construction company, the vacations we skipped, the winter coat I never replaced because the business needed the money more than I did. I thought about how many nights I had waited up for him with dinner going cold, telling myself he was just tired, just stressed, just building something for our future. Watching him now, laughing easily with another woman like I had never existed, I finally understood that the man I loved most in the world had been quietly erasing me for a long time before I ever noticed. A month earlier, Ryan had come home looking exhausted, gripping my hand so tightly it almost hurt, begging me to sign what he swore was only a temporary formality, a divorce filing meant purely to protect our apartment from his company's legal troubles. He held my face in his hands and told me I was the strongest woman he knew, that he needed me to trust him one more time, that he would never survive losing everything if I did not help him. I signed because I loved him, because I believed a man who cried in front of me like that could not possibly be lying, and that belief cost me everything I had left. "Have you seen enough?" a voice above me asked. I looked up to find a tall man in a sharply tailored suit standing over my table. He introduced himself as Nathaniel Cole, and without waiting for permission, he sat down and placed a thick folder in front of me. Inside was a notarized divorce decree dated 1 week earlier, filed the exact day I had signed what Ryan swore was only a formality. My hands started shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. "He filed it the moment you signed," Nathaniel said quietly, and I felt something inside me go cold and very still, the way grief sometimes does right before it turns into something sharper. Because I had also signed away my claim to our shared property to help him bypass legal complications. Everything, the apartment, the car, the savings we built together, now legally belonged only to him. Nathaniel did not offer me a single word of comfort, and somehow that was almost a relief, because pity would have broken me completely in that moment. He told me his own marriage to Vanessa was ending too, that she was quietly draining his company from the inside to fund the very affair I had just witnessed with my own eyes, and that he needed someone smart enough and angry enough to help him stop her. "If you agree, be at City Hall tomorrow morning at 8, he said, and walked away, leaving me alone with a cold coffee and a life I no longer recognized. I looked one more time at Ryan, still smiling that same smile, still completely unaware that his entire fortune of lies was 50 feet away from collapsing. Then I thought about every excuse I had ever accepted from him, every late night I had forgiven, every time I had shrunk myself smaller so he could feel bigger, and I realized I had absolutely nothing left to protect by staying quiet. The next morning, I stood outside City Hall in an ivory dress, my hands finally steady, and by 8:15 my signature sat beside Nathaniel Cole's on a marriage certificate. I photographed it and sent it to Ryan with a short message thanking him for freeing me so quickly. His call came within seconds, and I let it ring and ring until it finally stopped, savoring a silence I had never once allowed myself before. Nathaniel gave me a title, Chief Financial Officer of his company, and access to everything Vanessa had been hiding for years. It did not take long to see the shape of what she and Ryan had built together. Money moving from Nathaniel's company into Ryan's construction firm for a project that never actually happened. Not one brick laid, dressed up in official-looking paperwork designed to fool anyone who did not know exactly where to look. I was the one person in the entire city who did. When Vanessa stormed into my office days later, flanked by security, demanding answers, I felt something fierce and unfamiliar rise up in my chest. Not fear, but a kind of cold clarity I had never felt in 10 years with Ryan. She threatened me, told me Nathaniel was only using me the way men like him use everyone. At least he uses me honestly, I told her, and watched her storm out knowing exactly how frightened she actually was underneath all that silk and confidence. 3 days later, cornered and desperate, Ryan proved exactly how far his cruelty could reach. An anonymous email hit every employee in the company, a doctored video suggesting I had secretly been Nathaniel's mistress for years, timed perfectly to humiliate me in front of an entire building of strangers. I sat in my office reading the comments trickle in, feeling something old and familiar rise in my throat. The same helpless shame I used to feel when Ryan would twist small arguments until I somehow became the one apologizing. Nathaniel traced it back to Ryan within the hour, and standing in that lobby watching a room full of employees learn exactly what kind of man Ryan really was, I did not feel triumphant. I felt something quieter and heavier, the final, complete death of the version of him I had loved for a decade. I confronted Ryan myself, in the gutted, nearly empty office of his failing company, surrounded by unpaid bills and broken promises. He did not apologize. He dropped to his knees and begged, the same performance he had given me 100 times over the years whenever he needed something from me. Tears on command, my name in that soft, wounded voice designed to make me feel guilty for his own choices. For the first time in 10 years, it did not work. I gave him a choice: sign over what remained of everything he had stolen from our marriage, or watch his elderly parents lose the home they had spent their whole lives paying off. He signed, sobbing, blaming Vanessa for everything as though he had never once had a choice of his own. I walked out into the cold afternoon air and let myself cry only once, briefly for the girl who used to believe every word that man said. Vanessa, cut off from her stolen money, turned her fury on Ryan next, abandoning him completely the moment he became inconvenient to her. I heard later that he faked a medical emergency in a cheap motel room while men he owed money to pounded on the door. And even then, lying in a hospital bed surrounded by machines, he tried one more time to manipulate me into pity, whispering that he could not survive prison, that I was the only one who could save him. I looked at him and realized with a strange and heavy sadness that even now, stripped of everything, he was still trying to use my love against me one last time. What broke Vanessa completely was a single handwritten ledger, hidden in a fireproof safe inside Ryan's parents' modest home in Pennsylvania, documenting every dollar the two of them had moved together. Sitting in that same living room where I used to eat Sunday dinners as a beloved daughter-in-law, telling his mother the truth about her son and about our secret divorce in the same breath, remains the hardest thing I have ever done. She dropped a coffee cup and it shattered against the floor, and the sound of it still echoes in my memory some nights. Federal agents raided both companies within days. Vanessa was caught trying to flee by boat, dragged out in handcuffs in front of a swarm of cameras, every dollar she had tried to hide frozen by the government. Ryan cooperated in exchange for a lighter sentence, and Vanessa, refusing to the very end, was sentenced to life in prison. I sat in that courtroom and felt nothing like victory, only a long, tired stillness, the kind that comes after carrying something heavy for far too long. A week later, I placed a signed dissolution of marriage on Nathaniel's desk, believing our arrangement, built entirely on mutual revenge, had run its course. He read it once, then tore it cleanly in half in front of me without a word of hesitation. "I do not want a temporary wife," he said, his voice low and steady in a way that cut straight through every wall I had spent months rebuilding. "I want a partner. I want the woman who sat across from me in that cafe with her hands shaking, and still had the courage to say yes to an impossible offer from a stranger. I have spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. You are the first person who ever fought beside me instead." I stood there holding the torn pieces of my own exit plan, and for the first time since that afternoon on the patio, I let myself feel something other than survival. "I want a partner too," I finally whispered. my voice breaking on the last word in a way it had not broken even in the darkest weeks of the divorce. Not someone who needs me to disappear so he can feel powerful. Someone who sees exactly who I am and still chooses to stay. Nathaniel crossed the room, took my face in his hands the way Ryan once had, except this time there was nothing performed about it, and told me quietly that he already had. The very first day he sat down at that cafe table and refused to look away from me. Ryan and Vanessa are exactly where they belong now, paying for what they built on other people's trust. I am standing exactly where I chose to stand. Not because a stranger offered me a fortune on a cafe patio, but because somewhere between the betrayal and the reckoning, I finally remembered that I was never the smaller person in that marriage, only the one who had forgotten her own worth. If Alexis's story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that betrayal does not have to be the end of your story. And make sure you subscribe to the Revenge Tales for more real stories about betrayal, justice, and the strength it takes to rebuild everything from nothing. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.